Welcome to Canine Handler Fitness. This is a podcast for dog sport handlers who want to feel strong, capable, and confident in their bodies. Hi, my name's Liz Joyce. I am a strength and conditioning coach, and I specialize in fitness for agility and dog sport performance. In this podcast, we cover everything you need: strength, speed, mobility, and endurance. All the things to keep you moving, performing, and doing what you love, both in and out of the ring. Let's dive into today's episode. Hey y'all, and welcome back to the podcast. Today we're talking about dog-powered sports. Things like canicross, bike joring, ski joring, and really any activity where your dog is providing forward drive and you're working as a team. For me, as a fitness coach, I love the idea of being able to hit two birds with one stone and do really fun, active things with your dog that also encourage more of a lifestyle for you. And I also really think it's a great opportunity to meet like-minded people and expand your active friend network, because we all know that the biggest hack are your friends. So I think that for a lot of people, these sports can look really exciting, but also maybe a little intimidating. I know I for sure have a lot of questions about safety in regards to my safety, their safety. What strength am I going to need to have? What strength do they need to have? Kind of technique. And, all these are very nuanced. And I have a very special guest on today. This is Tanya Dobrzanski. She is a chiropractic, and she's also an animal certified chiropractor. She lives in Calgary, Alberta. So make sure if you're in Calgary that you go hit her up. She is also the president of the Canadian Association of Harness Dog Sports. So if you want to know the real deal, this is the girl with the down low. And Tanya, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into harness or dog-powered sports in the first place, and what kind of keeps you coming back?
Yeah, so I started in dog sports, aging myself, probably a couple of decades ago at this point. And in casual sort of conformation, obedience, that sort of thing, with my first dog, who was a Newfoundland. And then my partner at the time was working on a cattle ranch, so we got a couple of working cattle dogs that we then had to live with when they didn't have jobs on the ranch. And so that's how I found my way to harness dog sports. I was very fortunate to have some friends who were into ski joring that got me introduced into that sport. And once I strapped on a set of skis and put a harness on my dog, there was no looking back. So
it sounds like a lot of fun. I've personally been wanting to do it myself. My dog right now, I don't know, is the best fit for that, but I do have a new dog coming home soon, and I'm looking forward to strapping on and seeing where we go.
Well, and that's the wonderful thing about the sport, is that you don't necessarily have to have the dog that's going to be the racing dog, because all dogs love to run, right? So the dog you have sitting next to you on the couch is the dog you can start with. And, if you decide you love it, then you maybe specialize. But similar, most of us got into other sports like agility with the dog that was sitting next to us. We had a dog that maybe was a little bit more energy, and so we looked for some outlet for them. And then as we got and fell in love with those sports, we branched out in our breed selections, right?
Which I think is a really great first question. And this is one, when I talk about dog-powered sports with other people who are clients of mine, one of the first things they ask is what kind of dogs is this appropriate for? Some people have very small dogs. Some people, there's obviously all different kinds of breeds, but what kinds of dogs, in your opinion, are ones that people can start with? Is it for every kind of dog, or why don't you tell us about that?
Depending on the level that you want to participate, you really could do it with any kind of dog. So for example, I have Newfoundlands. That's my original breed that I love. We're talking giant breed, over 100 pounds. But historically, they were used in draft work, in pulling a cart, in, delivering milk or mail. So the transition to a harness sport for them was really easy. Put a harness on them. They know how to pull. But we're not going to be breaking land speed records, right? They're a low and slow kind of freight haul breed. Where, the working cattle dog I have was Australian Kelpies. They're a little bit faster. They like to run, right? So they can build a little bit top speed. My sister now has a miniature dachshund. He doesn't like to be left behind. Is he going to pull in harness? No. But is he going to run along with the team? Absolutely. Where you got to be careful is if you've got dogs that maybe have restrictions in their breathing. So you're kind of squishy face dogs, or dogs that are going to be more sensitive to temperature. Then you have to be smart about how you do it. Not to say that you can't do it, but you got to be a little bit more careful than you would with sort of your average sport breed, right?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Which is like the next question I have for you is about the human side of it, because this is a human fitness podcast.
Yeah, totally.
The questions I have, and like, I'm going to assume that there's different amounts of technical skills that the human needs to have. And I'm wondering if you could kind of tell me about what kinds of technical skills, and like, in your opinion, with canicross and bike joring and ski joring, what kinds of humans do you see starting in these different kinds of sports? And can you kind of tell us about what sort of prereq skills you'd recommend they have? And if they don't have any, where can they learn about that stuff?
Yeah, from the human side of it, again, it comes back to how you want to participate. But in order to keep your dogs excited about this, unless you have a large team, you're talking 4, 6, 8, 10 dogs, you are probably helping when you are out with your dog. So obviously there's a certain level of cardiovascular fitness that's required. And kind of on that endurance side of things, if you're thinking about, when you play agility, maybe you're running for a minute at a time. If you're going to do canicross in sort of Western Canada, typically our canicross races are in the 3 to 5 kilometer range. So are you, the human, able to continue running that distance? And it's something that you can work to build that endurance with your dog, but certainly there needs to be some of that cardiovascular endurance. If you want to do the bike joring, scooter, right, you should know how to ride a bike, but you may want to hone your skills of, climbing. How do I help my dog when we have some incline? Figure out what your gear range is, that sort of thing. If you're on the winter side of things, you probably should have some idea how to stay upright on skis. It can be very demotivating for your dog if you're trying to learn how to ski while they're trying to learn how to pull, right? So not to say that, you just strap on a set of skis and off you go. There is a little bit of, learn the technique and be comfortable. And then once you know that, then how do you hold your body so that you are a solid foundation when your dogs are pulling? So there's some core strength that's required, posture, those sorts of things.
So what about kick sledding? And wait, I also want to say that that's interesting you say about being like a bit of a pillar. We were just talking at our dog training group this weekend about tugging. And if you're not a solid thing for the dog to tug on, it can be not as much fun, and also could feel a little bit like confusing, coercive, whatever words you want to use. That makes a ton of sense, actually, that you'd want them to have a consistent, like, physical sensation. That's interesting. And what about kick sledding? And also, if someone was really at a beginner stage, which of these different activities you just mentioned would you recommend they start with?
Yeah, so kick sled and sprint style sled, there is some balance involved there. You're not just, a passenger. You need to be able to steer through corners. Kick sleds are a little bit less stable than your traditional dog sled. They weren't really developed for high speed and maneuverability. They were originally developed in, Scandinavia, for transporting groceries or single passenger. They use them for ice fishing, and human propelled. So when you add dogs to the mix, the speed increases a bit. Now they're nice in that they steer, a kick sled steers more like you would on skis. Where a dog sled, depending on the style you get, a wooden sled has a different way of driving than, a fiberglass sort of sprint sled. So, but again, you need to have some upper body strength to hang on. You need to have some core strength so that your balance is good. If you're just getting started, walk before you can run, right? So all our dogs, my dogs included, my young puppies to, my older dogs, we do a lot of groundwork. And so that's a set of sneakers, a harness, a bungee line, and we go walking or, practicing in the yard or practicing on a trail somewhere, encouraging that forward movement. The natural transition from there is from a walk, we go to a jog, right? So Canicross is kind of your easiest point of entry, your least amount of cost, and your least amount of specialized skills. If you're like me, I pretty much will run when a bear is chasing me. I want a little bit more speed. So the transition to a wheeled conveyance or to skis was just an easier transition. Not to say, when we ski in areas where we see other cross-country skiers, it's so funny to see people say, oh, you're cheating because your dogs are pulling you. And I said, my answer is always, I have to keep up. I can't just be a passenger. I have to help out or my dogs aren't going to keep going, right? So I'm just not a runner. It's not what's my forte, but it is the easiest sort of starting point for the average person.
I can see that makes sense. You were telling me that there's a lot of people starting to do canny hiking, which I'm super stoked about. Can you is that something that you see people getting together in groups to go do that? Or is that more of like a solo thing? Like, is that
absolutely
there's kind of like clubs sort of, or
depending on where you are in the country, we call it Canny Trail, is becoming more popular. Out east, particularly in the Maritimes, they will actually have Canny Trail events. And so it tends to be, more of like a single track trail in the trees, where you're maybe not necessarily running full speed, but you might do a mix of walk run or hike run. And then out west, we're seeing people that, you want to go do a day hike or a snowshoe and you want to take your dog with you, but you're in a provincial park where by law they have to be on a leash. Having your dog on a typical flat collar and walking next to you might not be as easy depending on where you're walking. So throwing a harness, you putting on your belt, and then they can be out in front of you. They're giving you a little bit of assistance if you're doing an incline, but you're, going for a hike together. And then having appropriate equipment on your dog so that they're not getting hurt while they're out there, right? They're not being restricted by, the wrong kind of harness or an ill-fitting harness. They're not, choking themselves on a flat collar because they're seeing a squirrel or something like that, right? So we're definitely seeing a lot more people in the hiking community that are using harnesses when they're taking their dogs with them.
That's cool. I was telling Tanya earlier that when I started getting back into hiking this year, it had been quite a long time, basically on bed rest for quite a while. And I strapped Levi on his harness, his well-fitting harness, and I had a belt on, and he helped me a lot. Actually, I was really happy to have his assistance.
Yeah, for sure.
So you had said something about how you train your dogs, and I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit, like if someone was really beginning and maybe they had a harness that it maybe isn't specifically for dog-powered sports, but they've got not a harness, a belt. So if they've got a belt, maybe they clip a leash to it. How do you train your dogs or teach people to train their dogs to pull forward? Like, what does that look like? I can just imagine if I put a harness on Levi and a belt and I was like, let's run, he'd be like, I don't really know what we're doing.
Yeah,
so,
what are you doing? We
exactly.
always joke that there's never your dog is going to have the worst leash manners until you throw a harness on them and all of a sudden they're a competition obedience heel right next to you.
That's it. That's exactly
it. I should say that there are, if you go on social media and you look in your province, there is likely a mushing organization in your province, and there are people within that organization that will teach clinics. So in a best case scenario, find one of those people to guide you. The Cliff Notes version would be, I tell people always start with what you have, and what you have might be, a car harness and a couple of leashes, but you want to make sure your dog loves this before you start spending money, right? So, when I started, I had a harness that I used to buckle my dog in the back seat because she wanted to herd cars as they were going by, and I didn't need her flying forward onto the dashboard. So that's what I started with, right? And then I just took a couple of leashes, one looped around my waist and one clipped to that harness, and off we went. The basic foundation of it is I'm gonna, find a trail. I like to use a trail that, where you would normally take your dog for a walk, where they understand the goal is to move forward. But in this scenario, what I'm looking for is the dog to move forward comfortably ahead of me, which might be different than how I normally walk my dog. So that's already something strange. And I'm looking for them to actually lean into that harness. So we'll, come on, let's go. We're walking. As soon as I see that dog lean or push into that harness or move a little bit ahead of me, I'm going to reward them with movement. That movement might be that I give them a little bit more line so they can move forward in front of me, or that might be that I'm increasing my pace. And I'll, similar to when you're, if you're teaching, any sport or any trick, you're going to mark what you're looking for with a yes or, good dog or whatever. And then the reward for us, it's harder. How do you reward your dog when in a race environment, they're, 1.5 meters ahead of you on a harness? I can't really use food. So we sort of lean back to what is used commonly in like horse sports, is that you reward with movement or removing of pressure. So if my pressure is I'm pulling them by their harness, I'm releasing that pressure to allow them to run forward when they start to lean into that harness, right? So it's a lot of that. Now, we say the dog's going to be right next to you, or they might be like, I have no idea what you're doing. I'm going to go sniff this good smelling thing over here. So in that initial introductory phase, we are also teaching what we kind of call a moving leave it. In traditional mushing, that'll be we use on by as a command. But basically, I'm not going to stop when my dog smells that little sniffy thing. Where if I'm taking them for a walk, I give my dog sniffy time. So there is a period of time where they get more leash and they're allowed to stick their nose in the grass and sniff and, mark. And that's part of their enrichment. When I'm training harness, I don't stop when they're distracted by something that they smell. So I will continue to move forward and I'll give them that on by command. And when they start moving with me, yes, good dog, right? And then I reward with a bit more speed. So those are kind of the two starting points. You can start teaching your turning commands and that sort of stuff. You can do at home, right? I sit with my dogs on the sofa. If I want to teach a right turn, I tap them on their right shoulder. They turn their head to the right. Whoop, they get a cookie, right? So those things that you can do at home, which is, a terrible cold day, lots of rain or something, then there's something that you can do at home. Throw into the mix of your fitness and conditioning, do it along with your, whatever you're doing with your dogs in terms of their stretches. That's another activity that we'll add in at home.
That makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like not too complex to get started with, except that on by, I imagine, would be maybe a little bit of a process.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we have to reteach ourselves, because a lot of us allow our dogs, the walk is for them. So we allow them some of that freedom on their walk. So we have to sort of retrain our own brains to go, oh, nope. The job here is forward motion. This isn't sniffy time, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. We are both Canadians, which means we get that nice white stuff. But what kinds of weather conditions, like if somebody lived in a warmer area or, can you tell us about, are there some safety type things, not just weather related, but are there some things that for you'd be like saying to me, hey, Liz, if you want to get into dog powered sports, you really have to be cautious about these things.
Yeah. The first thing that's really important is temperature. And most people think and worry about cold temperature. But really for our sport specifically, we worry more about warm temperatures. So within our rule set, Canadian Association of Harness Dog Sport rules, individual province rules, and our international federation rules, there are maximum temperatures that we will allow competition. And that is constantly being reevaluated as the sport evolves. The thing that occurs when you start doing prolonged cardiovascular activity with those dogs is their heart rate goes up, their circulation to their extremities increases, they start panting, they start developing foam in their mouths. And so they're more susceptible to overheating than they are to the cold weather, right? So it's really going to be dog dependent, what kind of breed you have, how much coat they have, how fit are they when you start this. But it's really important to be very familiar what signs of overheating looks like. And by the time you see the significant signs of overheating, things are bad. We don't want to get to that maximum sign where the dog is collapsing, where their tongue is, fully pancaked, curling back. we've pushed too far, right? So really, if there's an area that I encourage everybody to research is what do those early signs of heat discomfort look like, and what do those later signs of heat discomfort look like, and what do we do if we see that? But the reality is that temperature is increasing. We're not seeing the same cold temperatures now that we used to. Our summers are being warmer. So do we stop our sport, or do we adapt to what we're doing? So what we're finding is we're going to run our dogs somewhere where we've got access to a lot of water. So next to creeks, next to lakes, next to rivers, so that if we do see the starts of overheating, our dogs have a place where they can cool themselves off. We're going to go earlier in the day or later in the day when it's not, blaring sun beating down on you. If you've got a double-coated breed, I know it's like the cardinal sin is to shave a double-coated breed. The reality is, if they don't have a thick parka, they are going to have a better time cooling themselves. If your dog isn't growing their coat back, that's a whole rabbit hole. But if your dog isn't growing their coat back, they have something else going on. All right. Look at dogs being shaved for surgeries. Their coats are growing back, right? That's a whole nother rabbit hole I could go down.
All I can picture right now is Levi with no hair except his head,
right? Big lion's mane. Yeah. But with my newfies, I'm gonna trim out hair in their groin. I'm gonna trim out hair in their armpits to allow movement of air through there. Dogs don't sweat like we do, but they will send circulation to the skin to try and dissipate some of that heat. If you trim fur in feet, one, you prevent the buildup of snowballs, but two, you allow for, cooler ground to hit those paw pads so that they can help cool off, right? And then free access to water, drinking, clearing the foam that's forming in their mouth when they're running for a long time so that their tongue and their oral mucosa can exchange heat to the outside. But the important key to that is that your outside temperature isn't also hot, right? So that's the biggest safety thing that we can really hound home, is that we really, really worry about the heat. Now, the opposite side of that, on the cold side of things, if you've got a dog that's not coated, you've got like a whippet or something like that, the cold weather is going to be something that you factor in, right? So on our cold side of temperatures, our cutoffs are significantly farther, but they are there. If we're risk of frostbite of our athletes, risk of frostbite of our dogs, then yeah, we're going to maybe shut things down. There are things you can do. You can get appropriate booties for your dog. The booties that we use for dog mushing look very, very different than what you can buy in a normal pet store. They're a lightweight Cordura material, which is kind of like a lightweight canvas. Its only purpose is to prevent the buildup of snowballs, ice crystals, being abrasive to the feet. Because if a dog is running, their circulation, their heart rate is up, their circulation to their extremities is keeping those feet warm. But we can protect it from the abrasiveness of snow, those sorts of things. Wearing appropriate type of layer. In mushing, we don't typically use, your PJ style or your normal coat that you would find in a pet store, but we'll use something like a belly blanket, which is keeping groin or areas where skin is exposed warmer, right? If you're going to be more of your low and slow distance type of a musher, then you might get leg wraps to prevent snowballs from forming, and you may end up getting like a rug style, but that's, I'm planning on being out there in the cold for a long amount of time. Me personally, I like to sleep in a warm bed at night, so I keep it short.
As a human, that's not going to be a problem for me.
Right?
I have friends that do kick sledding and ski joring in the wintertime, and in the summer they do other active things. Mm-hmm. Do you see people being pulled into dog-powered sports that have maybe more outdoor active lifestyles with their dogs in the summer, maybe doing dog sports or hiking or whatever? Do you see like that specific group of people coming into dog-powered sports as a way of conditioning their dogs?
Absolutely. We see a lot of people that come from the agility side of things. conditioning and agility has really taken off from where it was when I started 15 years ago. You've got the dog specific conditioning equipment now. You've got whole programs set on how to strengthen your dog specifically for that sport. But then, if you don't have access to a heated barn in the winter, what are you doing with your dog? There's only so many, sits and stands and those sorts of things, treadmills, right? Some people are doing that. The other thing that we'll see is people who are maybe active in, they do hiking, biking, those sorts of things in the summer. And then come wintertime, maybe they're doing fat bike or they're doing some cross-country skiing. And they see the harness dog people out on the trail and go, oh, my dog's at home on the couch, didn't come with me. This is a way I can get the dog to join me in these winter activities, right? So I can't tell you the number of conversations we have in a parking lot because people saw us on the trail and they come find us after to be like, how do I start doing this, right?
That's cool.
Yeah.
So people are using dog-powered sports for a conditioning type of thing for their agility dog, for example. As someone who helps people navigate the sport, do you have any guidelines for people maybe who do agility that want to do some type of winter activity that is dog powered in terms of you mentioned short distance, you mentioned a longer distance. I'd love to hear your input on that.
Yeah. So I think the big thing is to really first take stock of what your goals are, right? If your primary sport that you're doing with your dog is agility and you want to compete at a high level in agility, think about what that sport is. That sport is short amount of time, right? Explosive power, a lot of explosive speed, and then collection of that speed. So that if you're going to transition into harness dog sports, you're less likely to want to do the endurance, the thing where you're out there doing 30 kilometers. They're not really the same thing, right? So you may want to do some harness sports, but you're going to keep it in that shorter range, 1 or 2 kilometers of that fast, running that's still utilizing the same strength and musculature that you would utilize in agility, right? That's not to say that you couldn't have a Sunday afternoon, I want to do something different and I'm going to go for a long ski, but that's not going to be what your primary training is, right? And then within our sport, right, there's sprint mushing, there's mid-distance mushing that's, in the 20, 30 mile range. And then there's long distance where they're doing 100-mile, 300-mile races. Those dogs probably aren't multi-sporting. They are only low and slow, long distance dogs, right?
Okay, so I get the short distance, but did you say the mid distance is 30 miles, so like 46 or 48 kilometers? And
Yes.
That's not one person with one dog. That's a team, right?
No, that's going to be team dogs, and that'll range in size typically in around 6 dogs to, which is those might be 10 to 13 mile races. And then the larger sort of open sprint teams can go up to open class, which doesn't have a limit. We don't see a ton of that in Alberta anymore. That's more popular in northern Canada and Alaska. But those disciplines, you're looking at larger teams, right?
What's a larger team? 6 dogs. Like the idea of having 6 dogs look after period for me is so overwhelming. How many dogs is on a large team?
Yeah. So in the races that I've attended in Alberta, there's typically a 6, a 10 dog class. If you're looking at open class, they don't limit however many dogs you take out is how many dogs you take out. So for most people, it's going to be in the 12 to 14 range. But there are larger team mid-distance mushers that are going out with 20 dogs. It's quite an impressive thing to see those dogs running at speed, right?
Yeah.
They're not going 10 kilometers an hour. They're going 35 kilometers an hour, and they're all working together, and
crazy.
It's a whole different animal because your dogs that are in charge, your 2 out front, are 100 meters out in front of you.
That's wild.
And the power is just wild. Watching those dogs, they'll often escort them up to a start line with a snow machine so that they can control them because you, the musher, you're not holding them back. It's a whole different animal. Yeah, it's wild.
Oh my gosh. So someone on a little kick sled with a 35
You're not
pound
doing
dog.
that on a kick sled. You'll make toothpicks out of the kick sled. But
Like,
not to say that you don't start. When I started this, like I said, I started with the dogs that were in my house. Now I have purpose-bred sprint mushing mixes. They're called Euro hounds. My passion discipline is 2-dog ski jor. That's the one that I love. The being out on the trail, the squeak of the snow under your skis, that's really, where I'm my happiest. But in a million years, if you'd asked me as a child, would I be doing this? I would have never told you that. Right. So
that's a cool thing about these dogs, though. They pull us in all these different directions in our lives.
yeah.
Yeah. So just to recap, if somebody wanted to get started with an agility dog, you would say, let's keep the sprint distance. Let's keep their distances short, like 1 to 2 kilometers.
Yeah.
And you're also saying that kind of as long as somebody as an individual could do the activity without the dog, that anybody can kind of start with any dog that they have at home.
Mm-hmm.
Really minimal equipment, just assuming that they don't have one of those those no pull harnesses that cut the shoulder off.
And that's the thing, right?
Well-fitting
really
harness.
Think about your equipment, what you're doing. And it's so funny. We, as mushers, we always laugh, no pull harnesses. Like, is there such a thing? No. Sort of a misunderstanding of dog physiology to have no pull harnesses. That said, obviously, if you've got a dog that's got something going on with their trachea, you want to make sure that you have that properly fitting harness, and you can teach them the difference. So I walk you in this harness, but we run in this harness, right? And that's where your equipment becomes important. So, I walk my dogs on slip leads or halties, and then we do our mushing in harness. So they know the difference. The harness comes out, it's a different dog that I'm dealing with than if they're slip lead, their martingale, their halty comes out, they're like, okay, I guess we got to walk slow with this lady, right? Yeah. And then you condition just as you would with any sport. You're going to condition them to that. So I'm not going to, if I haven't done harness sports all summer because I've been playing agility, I'm not going to go and throw a harness on my dog and take him for 5K on that first run, right? That first run might be 500 meters, might be a kilometer, and we're going to build up our endurance. The nice thing about dogs is their endurance builds up really quickly. Usually it's the human that takes more time. So
Yeah, that is true. I've had quite a few clients over the last few years that have gotten into dog-powered sports because they are just wanting to spend more time with their dog. And it's been really cool to see how that passion of spending more time with their dog kind of led them to dog-powered sports, which led them to an overall fitness routine overhaul.
Absolutely.
And people are badasses. It's really...
Yeah. And even, like you might be playing agility with your dog and you're good at your, shorter races, but then you realize the importance of conditioning your animal, warming them up before they go, right? And a lot of the recommendations for warm-ups is like, okay, let's go for a trot for 5 minutes. Well, I've got to trot with my dog for 5 minutes. I can run an agility course, but can I trot with my dog for 5 minutes, right? So that's also some of the... people go, okay, I'm going to take up canicross and try and increase my own fitness to help my dog's fitness, right?
I just think that's awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's always the good motivator, right? Because rain or shine, your dog wants to go out and wants to go do activities. So if you're sort of feeling like, I'm a little bit lazy, I don't want to get off the couch today, they'll be there going, hey, here's your shoe. Let's go for a run.
Just bring my harness over to you.
Yeah. I had a dog who used to bring me my sneakers. I would run with her and she would bring me my sneakers. And I'm like, but we ran yesterday. My legs are tired. I don't want to go.
But I do.
Yeah.
There was some really interesting things, some safety precaution stuff that I hadn't really considered. Like, to me, 15 degrees, my dog tells me 15 degrees Celsius, which is 60s in Fahrenheit. That's too hot for him. He hates that. But I wouldn't have thought that he's pretty temperature sensitive. I would not have thought that 15 degrees was a cutoff. So that's really good to know. And that's actually also a really great tip to choose routes that have water nearby so they can cool off and make sure they get that foam out of their mouth so they can
Yeah.
transfer place in their mouth, which is smart. I love that.
It's, it's an area that's been widely studied, and that's the thing that they say always is if you can clear that layer off of their mouths, then they can cool and regulate their temperatures a lot better. So yeah, I mean, learning that, and for the sport I do, is just, it's mind blowing, right?
Mm-hmm. And I hope all of you are leaving this conversation imagining Levi with no hair except his head.
Just a lion's mane.
How did they get a hold of you? And I know that you're the president of the Canadian Dog Powered Sports Association, I think it's called.
Canadian Association of Harness Dog Sports.
Thank you. So if someone wanted to get a hold of you, are there similar organizations in every country? And then like what kinds of events do you put on? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the Canadian Association is really the governing body for the sport in Canada. They're really the intermediary between Canadian athletes and the international federations. However, they then work with the different provinces with what we call a regional organization. So currently there are regional organizations for British Columbia, Alberta. There's one in the works for Manitoba, there's one for Ontario, Quebec, and then the Maritimes, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. So if you're really looking for guidance, we encourage that you go reach out to those associations and then the clubs that operate within them. So in Alberta, we have the Alberta Association of Harness Dog Sports that sort of oversees the sport in Alberta, and then clubs within that will host events. So, quick Google search. Facebook is a wonderful place. Is there a local mushing club that I can start meeting up with, or see if they've got seminars going on? Ask your friends. If you've got friends that are in dog sports, they probably know somebody that does harness sports at some level that can sort of guide you in the right direction. I tell everybody, right, make sure you start with what you have. Don't go buying all the fancy gear and then your dog hates it, but start with what you have. and my big sort of mission in life recently has been to remember why you started it, right? You started doing this with your dog because you like to spend time with your dog. And so it better be fun, right? If it's not fun, then why are we doing it? So really, be good to your dog, be kind to your dog, enjoy that time with your dog. We all know it can change in a second, but keep it short, keep it fun. It's a little cheese ball, but after having a couple of dogs with some crazy health journeys, I really try to make sure that I appreciate that time that I spend with them on the trail, and that I tell them that I appreciate that time that I'm spending with them on the trail. And that's hard sometimes when it doesn't go well, where they chased a squirrel and took you up a tree or something like that. But really, remember the joy in spending the time with your dog, because it can go away in a second.
Yeah, I think we've all, I'm sorry that you had that experience, and you are right. It can change in a hot second. You're right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I will leave links in the show notes so you can get a hold of Tanya in regards to both her chiropractic practice, which I know a number of my friends use, and also her association. So you can reach out and get started yourself. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here with me today and choosing to spend this time investing in yourself. I hope you feel encouraged to take action. Even the smallest steps forward will add up in ways you cannot even imagine yet. If this episode gave you something to think about or lifted you up, please share it with a friend. You really never know who might need these tools today. For more information, practical tools, and resources to help you get stronger and confident both in and out of the ring, head on over to caninehandlerfitness.com. You can also find me on all the socials under the same name, so come on over and say hi. I'm here to help you build the skills, knowledge, and belief you need to reach your goals. Keep going, keep learning, and most of all, keep showing up for yourself. You've got this, and I'll be here cheering for you every step of the way.